team humanity, we are getting literally stupider, literally less intelligent at a time when our machines are getting so much smarter. Yeah, our ability to pay attention as a species is greatly declining. It's just stuff coming in, and it's almost all trivial.
We don't know what to focus on.
It does raise the interesting question of what abilities are we willing to forfeit forever? That's completely insane. If the political process is going to be played out largely on social media, I don't think is compatible with liberal democracy. It will never again be possible to know what's true.
What can actually be done?
The change is much bigger than fire. The change is much bigger than electricity. But with AI, if aliens landed, our top concern would not be what's going to happen to jobs. It's like, wait a second, are we the Incas and Cortez has just arrived? This is not like the calculator. This is more like the Big Bang. We have the honor of living at this hinge point in human history, and that's kind of thrilling.
I want you to come back in time with me for a moment. The year is 2009. Obama is in the White House. The most outrageous thing in the news is Kanye West interrupting Taylor Swift at the VMAs.
Yo, Taylor, I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish.
Something else happened that year. Something that didn't make headlines, but in hindsight might have been the beginning of the end of the world we knew. If you could fast forward a decade from that moment, drop a person from 2009 into our politics, our culture, our news feeds, they'd be confused, horrified even. Political violence, conspiracy, distrust, civility down, anxiety up, outrage up. What happened? The answer is likely in your hand or staring back at you right now. In 2009, Facebook released a simple ranking system meant to prioritize content. Rather than going in reverse chronological order, it would instead prioritize posts by interest, the things that it thought you wanted to see. Now, it didn't take long for this algorithm to become very profitable. Every other social media company launched their own version. But this small set of changes marked something bigger. Now, Sam Altman recently said social media algorithms were the first misaligned AI to reach a large audience, the first non-organic intelligence to change the way we think and the way we allocate our attention. The system studied us, predicted what we would click on, what would keep us scrolling. It's shifted the fundamental pattern of how we see the world. It actually pulls from the edges of a debate and forces everyone to pick a side based on those extreme opinions. These systems are now responsible for how the majority of us spend our time online. Now, I've been studying these technological shifts, and 2009 is the year I place on the hinge. It took time to scale for it to reach 1 billion people in 2012. The numbers show what it does to our attention. We've lost the muscle of sustained focus. Without shared attention, we cannot easily inhabit a shared reality. Without a shared reality, we cannot govern, legislate, or compromise. My guest today is Jonathan Haidt. He doesn't think this is just a phase. He believes we've passed an attentional threshold, a point of no return. But the most profound effects may be further downstream, in childhood development. John wrote the book, The Anxious Generation, which has become a global phenomenon and a #1 New York Times bestseller. John and I wrote a piece together in The Atlantic after I introduced him to my work on social media. What struck me most about our conversation wasn't the catastrophe. It was the possibility of choosing a different path, especially for our kids. Social media in this telling is not just a cultural nuisance. It now stands at the start of a continuum of a machine that leads us to tools like ChatGPT and the delegation of human judgment to algorithms more broadly. This episode is the beginning of a deeper conversation about that machine, the one we built, the one we are still building, and the one that we can still choose to shape. This is Into the Machine. I'm Tobias Rose-Stockwell, and this is Jonathan Haidt. John, great to have you. Thanks for taking the time to have this conversation. I'm looking forward to doing this the first time.
My pleasure, Tobias, because if not for you, it was that conversation in 2019 that got me on the line of technology and society. So I'm very grateful to you for that.
So it seems that this hasn't gone away, strangely. In fact, it's gotten much worse. If we were to bet on some of these issues and how good or bad they would become, I think we would have been wise to bet against our more optimistic selves at that point in time.
Yes. When you're at the early stage of an exponential curve, it's a pretty good guess that whatever's happening is going to continue to happen, only in a faster way. So there's that, and then there's so much more that we've learned since then that makes the future much more challenging. I was going to tweet something at the end of 2022, but I was going to tweet something like, "Goodbye to 2022. This is the most sane, normal year we will ever have, and that will be true every year from now on." And, but I thought, no, you need to make adjustments. Like, there's variation, and some years will be less. But it's also so dark that I just decided not to do it. But I think that is largely true.
So this is one of the problems I think we're facing here, is that we want to consume information that's accurate, but most of the information that's accurate is very dark right now. Most of the stuff, the verified news reports, for instance, speak on a regular basis, the world just looks darker and darker every year. And there is this process now, I think, of opening up our news feeds and just having this sense of like, oh my God, this is too much.
Yeah.
How does one maintain optimism and kind of a sense of a sophisticated understanding of what's going on in the world while it feels like everything's burning?
So let me put a few preliminary comments out there, because the things that I'm going to say with you are generally really dark. Like, I think that there's a good chance of really catastrophic outcomes. So let me just say right up front, the record of experts in predicting the future is not much better than a dart-throwing monkey. And this is the work of Phil Tetlock at Penn. He's been studying this for 20 years. You get experts making predictions. They're not really better than chance, when you can test exactly what the prediction was. When you get groups that have incredibly good thinking and they challenge each other's then you can get better than chance. These are possible futures. Mm-hmm. These are things that if we're going to talk about some trends, the way technology changes society, it always does. And so I want to focus on that, like, how is this rapidly changing technology changing our societies? And part of the reason that experts are so bad at predicting the future is that stuff happens that nobody expected. Mm-hmm. And so with AI, lots of stuff is going to happen that we can't expect. And there's some very smart people out there who think that it's going to be amazing. And they might be right. So let me just say it up front. They might be right. I am not confident that we're going to hell. Mm-hmm. But there is a much bigger chance of it now than there was, say, 10 years ago. Or at least it seems that way. So let me just put that out there. Mm-hmm. And so how do I maintain sanity with these trends is in part because nobody knows, and team humanity can't just give up. And not just team humanity and team democracy. We've got to do what we can to steer through this and come out in a better place. And that is definitely not impossible. There are ways to a much better future.
Let's back into this then from a slightly broader angle, thinking about the future. Where do you land on the prognosis, say, over the course of the next 5 years, democracy in the United States, in terms of artificial intelligence? Let's say both of those things, how they interrelate and what you see happening.
Let's start with liberal democracy. That's much closer to my original area of expertise. I study moral psychology. In 2004, I switched from studying how morality varies across cultures to studying how it varies across the political spectrum, understanding left-right. The culture war was heating up. Originally, I was doing this to help the Democrats stop losing by saying stupid things, as the candidates did in 2000 and 2004. But as I began writing The Righteous Mind, I realized two things. One, actually, conservatives, and here I mean like social conservatives, like Edmund Burke, Thomas Sowell, that whole tradition, they're incredibly wise about what it takes to have a stable and prosperous society, and a lot of stuff that I didn't know, and I think they're right about. And then the other was I began getting very alarmed about polarization, because the degree to which left and right hate each other, now compromise is not possible. And the American form of liberal democracy requires consensus, agreement, compromise. Mm-hmm. That was the choice the founding fathers made. In Europe, they have what's called parliamentary systems. It's called winner, whatever. But if you win the election, you actually get to make policy. Right. They're not as vulnerable as we are to effective polarization. And there's a political scientist, I'm blocking on his name, but there's a political scientist who wrote a paper that really stuck with me. He looked at democratic backsliding. So countries become more or less quality democracies. And there's a couple of organizations, there's one in Sweden, VDEM, that puts that in numerical form. So you can track who goes up, who goes down. Mm-hmm. And what this political scientist found is that democratic backsliding, getting worse, happens when you have effective polarization. Mm-hmm. To the extent that you hate the other side, then the ends justify the means. It doesn't matter. Okay, we cheat on the election. We'll change this law. We'll redistrict here. We'll do this with, it doesn't matter because they're so evil.
And just distinct from issue polarization, right?
Exactly.
Affective polarization is really
you hate
dislike
them.
for the
That's
other side, right?
Yeah, issue polarization is not really a problem. I mean, if there's different views on abortion or anything else and you argue about it, that's
very extreme, right?
That's fine. That's right. So it's the affective that makes us vulnerable. And this is all preparatory to saying, why is liberal democracy in general, and American liberal democracy in particular, so vulnerable to the effects of technology? And so the short story there, I can say it most concisely. Yuval Harari, I think, had a line in a podcast I heard. He said, democracy is a conversation, and what is the platform on which the conversation is taking place? And if it's the public square in a town with limited number of members who know each other, are tied together for the future, it can work pretty well. But when that conversation moves onto Twitter, it's radically different and I think not sustainable. That is, I don't think if our interaction with each other, if the political process is going to be played out largely on social media, there could be forms of social media. I hope we'll talk about that. We could imagine forms that would actually support that. But the ones that we have that especially use the engagement-based business model, advertising-based business model, I don't think is compatible with liberal democracy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm immediately drawn to asking about some of these models, which we can come back to briefly, but let's touch on your take on AI really fast.
I was concerned about these problems of democracy in society back around 2008, 2009, and then through the culture was heating up and changing. And I started really worrying about the balance of centripetal forces that pull a society in and centrifugal. And so I started worrying in 2017, I started worrying we had these really strong centripetal forces in the post-war world and 3 television networks, and we'd had a common enemy, and we'd had low diversity and high assimilation. We had all sorts of asabiya is this Arabic word for group cohesion. And that's been fading away. And so I was getting increasingly alarmed about that in 2017. Hadn't thought about AI at all. I'm just saying other things and social media. Very alarmed by 2017. And it's really only once ChatGPT came in, it was November of 2022, and I had a lunch with Eric Schmidt, and it's then once we saw ChatGPT, which was of course marvelous at first, that we're beginning to see what effects it's going to have. And so Eric and I wrote an article in The Atlantic where we talked about a few ways that AI is going to make democracy worse, or at least be very challenging. Yeah. And one was by damaging the mental health of the kids. We older people made a mess of this democracy. But if we're raising a bunch of kids who have weak social skills and find it difficult to talk with people who are different, not their fault. This is what the technology and other things did to them. So one is the increasing effects on mental illness. So whatever social media and video games and porn are doing to kids now, you add in AI, the social media is going to be far more engaging, and the content written by AI is going to be so much better than anything a person could write. Same thing for video games, same thing for porn. So it's going to make that a lot worse. The second was it will never again be possible to know what's true. Okay, I'm overstating it a bit, but
I don't know if you are, honestly.
Yeah,
John.
actually.
This is, I sent you a quote recently from Jack Dorsey, who said that he thinks that we are going to be within this 5-year window, within a reality that it is actually impossible to tell what reality is. And that we're going to be so mediated by our tools and by our algorithms that it's just going to feel like we're constantly living in a simulation. And so
that's right.
This is the founder of Twitter. He's a technologist. He's very kind of ahead of the curve on this.
That's right.
So,
when the people who know the most about a thing are the most alarmed, that's when you should be alarmed.
Agreed.
I remember reading someone saying that about epidemiologists in January of 2020. If they're the most alarmed, we should all be alarmed.
Yeah, and part of me, I just don't see bounding points to that, right? There's not any kind of oppositional forces that potentially pull us back into a shared common reality from the algorithmic side, right?
Yeah, that's right. An invasion.
There's incentives on the other side necessarily.
An invasion from Mars or a war with China. There are things that would be very powerful.
Right. Maybe an authoritarian, some kind of really extreme.
Yeah. If you think about it as every society has a whole bunch of centrifugal forces blowing it out and centripetal forces pulling it in. Right. And after having a period which was the highest cohesion since the revolution, probably, we're now in a period where we're going down on cohesion. Now, but that's not an internal process. There are things that could happen that could bring it up. Yeah. But I just want to bring up the two main threats that I now see is from AI, and this is why I am somewhat pessimistic, is that the first round of AI that we saw was omniscience. So if God came down to us in the 1990s or whenever and said, "Do you want omniscience?" The catch is everyone else gets it. I think we would have thought about it, And a lot of us would have said, okay, yeah, I mean, there's so much good that will happen if we all know everything. And, by and large, what I'm finding, and what I find in survey work too, people don't regret the internet. Like, people generally are really glad that we have the internet. It's social media specifically is really the thing that people are very negative about. So that first round was omniscience. But now God comes back to us in 2022 and says, do you want omnipotence? Do you want to be able to do anything? The catch is, everyone else gets it too. And if you think about the number of men, it's always men, the number of men who go berserk, who want to kill someone, or actually, and here it's not just men, you want to wreak vengeance on someone who slighted you, you want to destroy someone. If we all had a button like, let me nuke her, let me destroy his reputation, let me make him go bankrupt. Everybody has those buttons for everybody. And this is what I think is so scary about agents. Now, I'm sure more about agents than I do, but when it was just like, write me a limerick or tell me what therapy I should do, that's more like omniscience. But now that there's agents, like, how would I destroy, Joe Smith, who lives in Peoria? How would I, if I wanted to destroy him reputationally or financially, what would I do? And it'll look in, it'll say, here's what you could do, here's vulnerabilities, I could hack into his, and then you say, okay, go ahead and do it. So a world in which everyone can destroy everyone else is not going to be stable very long. So that's one fear, is that it superempowers everybody, including very, very bad guys. People who would, if they could, would kill everybody, because there are some people who would like to do that. So the risk of superempowering bad guys of all sorts is gigantic because of AI. That's the biggest one I see in the next 5 years. And then the potentially larger one is not the next 5 years, but I think it's, who knows, but I think 10 or 15 is, given that AIs are already showing signs of something like consciousness, it's never going to be like human consciousness, but they're not, people who said, oh, it's just autocomplete, that's all it is smart, like, come on. Have you dealt with these things? Like, and the fact that we're hearing story, there's deception, there's blackmailing, I mean, they're doing all these things. And there's a conference, I think Anthropic was hosting a conference on AI rights, like what rights will AIs have? Because as a social psychologist, I can say with confidence, if we're interacting with these things and developing relationships, we're going to feel they're human. And so what we're doing, so there's two threats here. One is, it's as though we're saying, how about if everybody gets slaves? Let's give everybody slaves. And one thing we know from the American slavery experience is it doesn't just warp the character and personality of a person who's enslaved, it warps the enslavers. To have power over something is a terrible, terrible thing. There's a line, Frederick Douglass, Narrative of the Life of a Slave, he talks about this woman the young woman, he was assigned by her father to work for her. And at first she was nice to him. And he's like, oh my God, she's so wonderful. No white person's ever been nice to me. But he says within a few months or 9 months, she turned into a monster. And he talks about the fatal poison of irresponsible power. And so since we're all going to have networks of agents working for us, that's going to warp the hell out of us, especially our kids, to grow up with all those servants. So that's one threat. But the larger threat is that as these servants begin to have rights, or we feel they need to have them, or they ask for them, someone who knows involved in AI said, if aliens landed, our top concern would not be what's going to happen to jobs. Everyone's talking about AI is going to destroy jobs. Yeah, that's true. But if intelligent aliens land, it's not like what's going to happen to jobs. It's like, wait a second, we now have, are we the Incas and Cortez has just arrived? So, these are the sci-fi possibilities, which I don't think are going to be realized in the next couple of years, but given the way things are going, I think they're real possibilities. Okay, is that dark enough for you? Tobias, let me hear yours. How are you thinking about this? Seriously,
wow.
What do you see as the
that's
main,
great.
the main threat?
This is good. This is, for me, when I start to project out into the future, it becomes just so highly variable so quickly. It became like the way I normally map trends is usually through proxies of very smart people that I'm like, this person thinks it's going to be, this bad. This person thinks it'll be this good. And so, I'm going to triangulate between them. And there's a whole kind of network of people that you track when you're making these kind of judgments about the future. In this particular case, the vast majority of people that I really deeply respect, all the way down to like real deep technologists who are really very, very into this, in this space, who know the limitations of this tech and know the potential scaling issues. I mean, even Gary Marcus, who is he's a huge skeptic, right? He doesn't think that it's probably more than 20 years out, I think, right? So that, even the most kind of extreme skeptics who actually understand the space think that this is going to be a dramatic, in the context of human life and the time scales that we're talking about, this is very soon.
Yeah.
This is
within the
lifetime.
lives of everyone, not every, within the lives of people alive today.
Right. When I think about that, it's pretty concerning. And the framing, I love the aliens framing, because it does feel like we are, the 3-body problem. Have you read that book?
I haven't.
You haven't? It's a great book. You should read it. Or watch the
key idea,
Netflix. But the key idea is that we discover that there are aliens in the nearest solar system.
Okay.
And they get a message from us, and they send a message back saying, we're coming. But it's going to take several generations for them to get there, essentially, right? And during that time, in that duration, you're like, oh gosh, well,
how do we prepare?
How do we
What
prepare?
should
What do we do?
wear?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And so there's this big kind of Manhattan Project in which everyone is starting to try to figure out what to do.
Wow.
And there's a bunch of interesting geopolitical things that happen in the meantime there, but it is as if we have gotten this.
Yeah.
This message that the aliens are coming. They are on their way, and they will be here very soon.
Yeah.
And what we're doing to prepare is what?
Passing laws that no state can regulate AI.
Exactly.
Like that's
Right.
really going to be our preparation.
Fortunately, that was taken
that
out of
went
the
right.
bill, but
That's
still,
right.
that's the direction, right? And we have plenty of people who are essentially the acolytes of these new aliens that are saying we need to speed it up, we need to get them here faster, because once they're here, they're going to save us. And so we are in this very strange moment where it does feel like we don't have a good handle on what the negative outcomes can be, partially I think because it's too much. So going back to the beginning here about the kind of the optimism or pessimism about the future, it does seem like we're hitting a attention threshold in which we're above it always. And the issue with that, both like from a personal perspective, is that it's very difficult to just figure out where to be angry or
maybe not to be angry at all.
Or
Maybe
exactly. Like I just can't deal with
appropriate.
this. I'm gonna, for my own mental health, I'm going to turn this off. And then from a more collective perspective, right, and democracy is a conversation, we don't know what to focus on, right? We don't know how to coordinate and actually fix problems one at a time because we can't even decide which problem is worth focusing on first.
That's right.
So, and that is a very effective strategy of propagandists. Historically, it's an effective strategy for kind of just overwhelming opposition, right? Fire hose of falsehood, just hitting us on all fronts simultaneously. But there is something here that is like we may have reached the maximum threshold of our attention and ability to address problems, both as individuals and as a society. It makes democracy function, right? It allows for democracy to function. So I'm curious your thoughts on kind of attentional thresholds, and if that, I know that we have a maximum number of items we can kind of hold in our head. We have a bit rate, right, in terms of inputs on a regular basis. Emotions do something very strange to that, right? Outrage does something very, very strange to that. Maybe you could speak to that for just a moment.
Sure. So the attentional issues, I'm now, and since I'm switching from 2019 through about 6 months ago, I was really focused primarily on the mental health effects. Because that's where the evidence is clearest for girls, social media especially. And, in the anxious generation, we have all these horrific charts, and you see them in many countries. So I was really focused on the mental health effects on kids. But what I've come to see, and we have some sections on this in the book, but there's so much more that I've learned since then, is that the damage to the human ability to pay attention is probably much bigger than what it's done to the mental health of the next generation. There was a John Byrne Murdoch in the Financial Times did a couple of articles laying out graphs about changes. And these social changes, especially since 2015, of more difficulty with reading comprehension, more difficulty reading. People literally have trouble reading a few pages because we get distracted so quickly. People saying that it's harder for them to pay attention. And then the most recent one, a couple of days ago, showing that humanity, and especially young people, are getting less conscientious, more introverted, and was it less agreeable, I think? But the most important one here was drop in conscientiousness for young people. And so if humanity is changing, like team humanity, we are getting literally stupider, literally less intelligent, less able to focus, less able to do things at a time when our machines are getting so much smarter. So our ability to deal with problems is getting less and less. And so a big part of this is just the sheer amount of stuff coming in. So to get back to your question, what's like the throughput rate? Like what can we process? And suppose I said it was, 100 units per hour. Suppose I said psychologists have found that the average human can process, 100 units of information per hour. And then we learn, actually, in the last 10 years, we're all getting 200 units, that's just the floor. It's just If you want to keep up with your social media feed, the average young person is on 5 hours a day. A lot of that is YouTube and TikTok, so it's videos. But you add it all up, social media, it's just stuff coming in, and it's almost all trivial. It's almost all triviality. And there's even a section in the Federalist Papers, Federalist 10, this incredible document, where Madison talks about how where democracy is such that where there's no real reason to fight, people will find the least little thing.
Right.
And he has a section about how it's not just like, it's the triviality. Like people will get lost in triviality, and then they can't, this conversation can't work. So as long as everyone is now hooked up with a status meter, and everyone's got a status meter, and everyone has to run to keep their status meter up and not down, that's 200 units of information as the floor. Now, what do you want to do with your life? You've got negative 100 units of information left to go.
Yeah.
What are you going to watch? What are you going to read? No books, nothing from more than 5 years ago. So yeah, our ability to pay attention as a species is greatly declining. I'll just put on a little footnote, which is all of this discussion is about what's happening in democracies, which used to be the best way to live by far. The greatest human societies, human flourishing, happiness, prosperity, rights. And so one of my greatest fears is that given the massive change in technology, which is going to hit different societies differently, as I think Tristan Harris first pointed out to me, these technologies are making democracies worse democracies, and they're making authoritarian systems better authoritarian systems. So I don't know that this is happening to the Chinese. They have social media. Their kids are online all the time too. But
they are using those kind of other forces to try to pull it in, right? They're highly regulating it. They're making sure that people are getting science videos, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So they're certainly able to reduce the toxicity of this on children. That's for sure. The 20th century was so thrilling. I got to see the whole last half of it. I'm older than you. I was born in 1963. So, I got to see the triumph. Well, you remember the 90s, right? The triumph, like, we won, democracy versus authority. Like, we kicked their asses. It was close. It was close there for a while, but we did it. And now it's like, okay, this is a totally new game.
There's this picture that I'll put up that is of school teachers in the 1970s picketing calculators in school. They say no calculators in the lower grades. I've seen a bunch of AI influencers and people that are, it's just another moral panic. It's happening all over again. Same story, different day. What is different about this moment when it comes to AI in schools, for instance?
So it does raise the interesting question of what abilities are we willing to forfeit forever? And I believe it's the case that, moving to eyeglasses has meant some evolution of, worse eyes or something but we're okay with that. And the calculator meant that we would not be nearly as good at doing multiplication in our heads in long division. Nobody knows how to do that anymore. Are we okay losing that entirely? And I think we are. But AI is fundamentally different because it's not a specific skill. It's the general ability to think, even to ask questions, because it'll help you ask the right questions, to do research. We outsource the basic core of creative thinking. Then there's not a lot left. Now, the theory would be, but if AI can do everything, then people be freed up to pursue art, and they'll, write poetry, and they'll do philosophy. No, they're going to just be glued to a screen consuming 5-10 second videos. And so I think sort of the AI future is one in which we're giving up abilities that we've never been asked to give up before. We're giving up human relationships. I mean, is it okay that suppose nobody ever has sex again? Suppose nobody ever has love again? Suppose it's just relationships with AIs. Are we willing to give up human relationships? I don't think so. So if human relationships and thinking are on the line, I think that's really different from giving up long division and the ability to read without glasses. So I don't buy it at all. What's coming, the change, I think that as we've been talking about, the change is much bigger than fire. The change is much bigger than electricity. The change is, at the level of the Industrial Revolution at first, but then it accelerates to become, and of course, imagine the whole Industrial Revolution, squashed into 5 years. So I think there is no historical parallel. In fact, here's one more big picture frame to think about this. Yuval Harari has a book, Nexus. I haven't read it, but he had a really good podcast with Sean Illing. And he points out there's 3 major points in the history of life. The first is the Big Bang 14 billion years ago, because that creates all the elements from which life can evolve. The second is the origin of organic life on Earth 3 billion years ago, whatever it is. Whenever the first protein, some coding molecule got encased in a protein code, whatever it was, that you had the first cell that could reproduce, that is a turning point equivalent to the Big Bang. Like now you've got something new in the universe, something that can replicate. And then, as he says, you get bacteria and paramecia and flatworms and fish and monkeys and humans, but it's all just biological stuff replicating. And then the third turning point is the development of AI, because this is something new under the sun in the same way that the first cell was something new under the sun. And as he points out, we're never going to get to the stars. I mean, that's just craziness. We can't reproduce in space. You can't send a 5-generation mission to another star. We have such needs as biological creatures, but AI is going to get to the stars. We've created something that is likely to spread throughout the universe, or at least the galaxy, because they will find ways to have, they can be very, very small. You can have very fast propulsion, and they can live for thousands of years. So this is not like the calculator. This is more like the Big Bang.
Cool. my immediate response is, wow. Like initial reaction and my counter to the calculator claim, teachers are carrying the sign saying no calculators in the lower grades.
Oh, in the lower grades.
In the lower grades.
Yeah, there you go.
So and they actually, they won, which is
and they were right.
We still know how to do multiplication and long division because there was a cap at a certain age.
And that's what we need to do with AI. This is what I've been saying.
Agreed. And
everyone needs to learn to use AI, but you first need to learn to think.
Agreed. But writing is thinking. Writing writing is externalizing thought, putting inquiry, building an argument. It's uncomfortable. I've noticed personally as I have used these tools, and I've been very interested in them since GPT-2. I've been in these tools, and the better they get, the worse I get. And I think that's mostly true across writing disciplines, and that when I'm using it to proofread, I'm there's this part of me that is this reaching out for a thought, right? That is when I'm writing, I'm writing that first few difficult sentences, and I'm backspacing and I'm re-editing and coming back to it a day later and being like, that was wrong, but maybe this is what I meant instead. It's a painful process. Thinking is hard. But with these tools, you're like, but maybe just make it better for me. Right. You can just ask ChatGPT to make it better for you. And in that process, it actually does much of the time make it better for you. And that extension that my arm was making out here, now it's just extending this far, right? And so my muscles are atrophying, my mental muscles are atrophying, and I'm becoming less inclined to ask those very difficult questions and unpack those difficult thoughts. And there's this regression to the mean that happens, which is it is a good answer, but it is not necessarily an original answer that is far, far better than could have potentially happened if you had gone out and searched for it yourself. So I think that's a piece of it. And that particular chamber of childhood that you are so preciously trying to help maintain and continue is so important, because if you give a kid this is a dark example, not to just add more dark examples to our very uplifting conversation. Alexander Wang, who's one of the you hear about
Scale
this?
AI.
Yeah, Scale AI. So basically, he said that he wanted to wait to have kids until brain-computer interfaces were better. So that because he wants his kid to be able to interface with an AI with a neural link.
Basically, I want to wait to have kids until we figure out how Neuralink or other, it's called brain-computer interfaces, so other ways for brains to interlink with a computer until they start working. So there's a few reasons for this. First is, in your first 7 years of life, your brain is more neuroplastic than at any other point in your life, by an order of magnitude. I think when we get Neuralink and we get these other technologies, kids who are born with them are going to learn how to use them in crazy ways. It'll be actually a part of their brain in a way that it'll never be true for an adult who gets a Neuralink or whatever hooked into their brain.
Which I know is actually quite repulsive and strange in some ways. Also, it's that's a very interesting science experiment. I kind of want to know what's going to happen, but also that's horrific if you think about that in a more substantial way. So that's just a strange moment with the next stage of these technologies. They are going to become more and more embedded in our eyes and our brains and our bodies. They've just gotten better and better and better at this.
So let me put a point on the table here about development and brain development. One of the main points I'm trying to make in my work is children are not adults. Like, I'm not going to tell adults that you shouldn't spend 8 hours a day watching TikTok. Adults can make their own decisions, but children are really not adults, and they're much more vulnerable, and they need to have a sequence through childhood. And when I was a kid, there was a thing called Carnation Instant Breakfast. And it had fat, it had protein, it had vitamins. And I was like, 7, and it was delicious, it was like chocolate milk. And, and I thought like, wow, you could just eat this, like this has everything. And you get this idea sometimes, they're like, well, people just need, like, here's what they need, and we'll put that. But if you feed people that, they're going to be very sickly, because we actually need so many different phytonutrients. There's all kinds of stuff that people don't think about when they just think, oh, let's simplify food. And, in the same way, social life, like, oh, we'll give people AI companions, and then they'll train even faster, they'll learn even faster. Like, no, you actually, like, there's so much, beginning with just like serve and return in those first exchanges of gazes in the first weeks of life. We're a biological species with a particular evolutionary history.
This is when you're sitting with a child and there's this process with the kid back and forth. That's right. Yeah.
And part of what's happening now is because the parents, everyone's busy. We all have 5 or 10 hours of extra stuff to do. So, as you know, childcare takes a lot of time. And while parts of it are thrilling, parents are now, I'll get you, and parents are looking at their phones. They're not doing, and I don't know if it's the parents doing that or the iPads, whatever it is. Kids are showing up at preschool with severe developmental delays, language delays, behavioral problems, because we messed up this incredibly important 5. There is no way to, let's just, give them an app for that or something. You have to go through the sequence. And this is what systemizers don't get. So there's a psychological dimension, systemizing and empathizing. And both are strengths. And if you're a high systemizer, low empathizer, at the extreme, that's autism. This is Simon Baron-Cohen's work. And people with high systemizing, low empathizing are brilliant engineers. And it's very common in engineering for that pattern. And so they can see systems and they can automate them and they can improve them, but they don't see the messy detail of all the other stuff that we need. And so this idea that, AI will be a better teacher, for a college student, I can totally believe that. But for a first grader, I really, I could be wrong, but I would start with a very strong assumption that no, they need to have, face-to-face, using a pencil or pen, fine, but, and doing multiplication. So for Alexander to think that his baby, if you were to change the developmental course and say, let's speed it up, let's let his brain develop, like, no, this is very likely to be disastrous. This is very unlikely to work as you might think.
Yeah. So, John, what would you say to people that believe that the evidence for social media harms in kids is just correlational?
I would say they are believing a line that is put out there and that has very little relation to reality. So, yes, it's true that social media comes in, goes big around 2012, and then kids get depressed. That's a correlation in history. It's very hard to prove what caused that. Fine. So we have lots of other kinds of evidence. There are experiments. Now, the experiment you really would need would be, let's take 1,000 kids. They grow up without iPads and smartphones and social media. They go through puberty. You take 1,000 kids and they grow up with the iPad and they get everything. And then we look at them at the end. That's the experiment that would be decisive, but we can't do that. What we can do is little toy experiments that pick up just a little piece of it. Mostly, let's get 80 college students or 150 college students and have half of them reduce their social media to an hour a day and half don't. And let's see if they're less anxious and depressed afterwards. And the answer actually is they are. Now, it's not by a lot. And so the critics say, oh, the effects are small, it's tiny, tiny. But what they do repeatedly, I think, is they mistake variance explained in a study, experimental or correlational, with the variance explained in the world. But if the study only picks up a tiny bit of reality, and then you get a relatively small correlation, well, what else could you get? You couldn't get a large correlation. But what I've been doing recently, because I've been laying out that argument for years, and it doesn't seem to get through. People just assert, oh, it's all correlational. There are a lot of experiments out there. But even more importantly, what I've begun to realize recently is we researchers who are deep in the data, we're never going to convince each other. We always find flaws in each other's studies. But we're fighting over one small read off of reality, these toy experiments. What if what if a woman said that she was mugged by 3 men and she knows the 3 men and she identifies them and she presses charges and she sees them in court and she says, that's them. Is that evidence? It's evidence, it's not decisive. What if the DA actually has the 3 men talking about it with each other? Oh man, we did her good. So they have basically confessions from the guy's social media account. Is that evidence? What if there were eyewitnesses who said, we all saw it? Is that evidence? That's where we are with social media. The kids themselves say the major cause is social media. A lot of studies show that. So the kids themselves point to it as the culprit. The parents point to it as a culprit. The teachers, the psychologists, people who work with kids, it's hard to find ones who say, oh, Instagram's been so good for my daughter. Oh, it's been so good for my students. So we've got eyewitness testimony, we've got lots of witnesses, and we've got confessions. We've got so many quotes from internal company documents. And so to those who say, oh, it's just correlational, no, there are so many different kinds of evidence. Please open your eyes. Could you really make a case that all the people who said, the employees at TikTok and Meta, all those employees, they were wrong? And the parents who think that their kid is dead because of something, they were wrong? They mistook correlation for causation? The kid, he would have committed suicide anyway, even if he wasn't getting sextorted. No, I don't think so. So there are so many kinds of evidence, and I just keep putting them out there. Go to afterbabble.com, where we also have academic publications. This is work that began with Jean Twenge. So it's just not true. It's just not true.
So there's a line here in the same vein, which is that people's preferred behavior, even if it is something they dislike, will sometimes become a norm over time, right? So you've been relatively forceful about different interventions, what else is possible here for parents to do, for legislators to do, for schools to do, what can actually be done?
So the key insight that I had while writing The Anxious Generation is that this is a collective action problem. And the standard advice, which is, we can't tell you what age to give your kid a phone. Every child's different. Talk to your child. See how she does, No, if half of the 5th graders have a phone, then your daughter needs a phone. And so the only way to solve this is collective action. The fact that the kid, and we have surveys done with the Harris poll of parents, of Gen Z, and of kids, and there's such regret. As you said, people are doing things that they know is wrong, they know is not good for them. Suggests either that there's an addiction process, which is why you see regret over smoking, but that's an individual decision for the most part, or it's a social dilemma. It's a social trap where people have to be on it because everyone else is on it. And what that means is that the solution has to be ways to break the trap and let people out. And so in the book, I wrote it as an American, assuming that our Congress is broken and we will never get help from our legislators. I just took it for granted. Meta spent so much money to influence Congress. They were able to stop COSA last year. We'll see if they can stop it again this year. So I was assuming no legislation. Let's just do this with norms. So what are the norms? No smartphone before high school. That shouldn't be a law. I'm not saying that there should be a law that you can't give your kid a smartphone in 6th grade, but it should be a norm. So the second is no social media before 16. That really should be 18 because this is an inherently adult activity. Talking with strangers on platforms that have no age or identity verification. People use fake names, which includes lots of sextortionists, drug dealers. So talking with strangers and exchanging intimate information with strangers is an inherently adult activity. So just don't do it until you're really 18. But here it would help to have a law of 16. But in the absence of a law, which it'd be hard to get in the U.S., although many states are doing it. And then, of course, the tech industry sues, and we won't know for many years. My point is just with norms: no smartphone before high school, no social media before 16, phone-free schools, and change our norms about keeping our kids locked inside because we're so afraid that they'll be kidnapped. There's almost no kidnapping in the United States, but there's a lot of suicide now. Suicide rates are almost double what they were in 2010. And so we can do most of this with norms. Now, there are places where laws would be really, really helpful. So many states.
What are those places where laws are really helpful?
The clearest one is phone-free schools, because this is a major educational decision. When I was a kid, if we all started bringing our television sets in and plugging them in and watching during class, they never would have allowed that. But that's where we are with these multifunction devices. So phone-free schools is going fantastically well around the world because the teachers all hate the phones. It's obvious. If you're watching TV, if you're watching porn, if you're playing video games, you're not learning, you're not engaging in class. So that's been a smash success. So that's the third norm, and that one is like, it's not done, but like it's moving so fast because everyone loves it. As soon as kids sometimes resist, by the third week, in general, the students say, wow, it's really fun to play cards with my friends at lunch rather than us each being on our devices. The other big one, the other biggest one, I mean, there are lots of things that could be done to regulate the properties of it and make it less toxic. But my view is these things are made to be as engaging as possible. And if kids are going to be spending 8 to 10 hours a day on their phones, I'm not interested in making that less toxic. I'm interested in making them spend a lot less time on their phones and on social media. So I think an age limit of 16 to open an account. That's what the Australia bill is about. People are misunderstanding this. People think that, nobody can watch YouTube if they're under 16. You have to show a driver's license to watch. No, that is not true at all. What the Australia bill says, what they're doing, is you can't enter into a relationship with a corporation. You can't sign the terms of service. You can't agree to give away your data to them. You can't agree to have the algorithms trained on you that get to know you until you're 16. But you can watch in a logged out state, and it's even true for TikTok or TikTok, but you'll still be able to watch YouTube. So I do think the governments need to change the crazy idea that as long as you say you're 13, you can go anywhere. That's completely insane. That was instituted with COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, 1998, I think it was. That was a huge mistake. We have to undo it.
In the digital world, things are very different from the real world.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a key tension here. It does feel like we are in a moment where we're highly protective of our kids. We're trying to keep them safe at all times. We're giving them phones. So what is that tension?
Well, we're wired to fear certain things like an attack. The actual risks to children in this country from the physical world are very small compared to what we think they are, whereas the risks online are vastly larger than most parents realize. Snapchat, we know from internal company documents, in 2022, they were getting 10,000 reports of sextortion, not a year, a month. That's just what was reported, not the amount that there was. And so kids are being sextorted by the millions every year, and a portion of them kill themselves. If anyone who saw the Netflix show Adolescence, we thought he was safe. He was on his computer. Computers are good. Like maybe he'll, become a programmer. Maybe it'll help his career. So one of the themes of my book is that we have overprotected our children in the real world. We've underprotected them online. Those are both mistakes, and we have to undo both of them at the same time. Because if you just take away the phones and have them stare at the wall, okay, they could read books, but much better if you could let them play outside together unsupervised.
There is this inevitability that you speak when it comes to the democracy stuff, right? That this is like kind of this transition point that we're in, and we're just watching things move, and there's not much we can actually do as individuals to change it. On the kids front, you're not saying that's the case. You're saying
God, there's so much we can do.
Yeah.
There's a lot you can do on your own.
And what do you wish you had done with your kids?
A couple of things that I think are so simple, and I wish I had done them. The clearest one is no screens in the bedroom ever. And if you start that when they're young, at a certain point, okay, they'll have to take their laptop in for homework. They've got a lot of homework.
Yes, so like no screens at all, no iPads in the bedroom at all.
Nothing. You never have screens in the bedroom. Okay. Now, you can have a TV and you can have a computer, like in the living room, in the kitchen. I'm not saying keep your kids away from them. And another thing that I wish I'd understood better is not to focus on screen time. Like we all agree screen time is not a good variable, but to make the distinction between stories. Stories are good. And your kid is better off watching 2 or 3 good movies a week than not watching anything. Humans have always been storytelling animals. We raise our children with stories. Stories are the way that we can see multiple worlds every week and learn from them. So that's good.
So what's different about that versus getting a story in a 30-second increment on TikTok?
Many things. So if you're watching a large screen across the room, you cannot interact with it. There's no stimulus response. It cannot put you on a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. It cannot train you. You're watching a story, and you're watching with someone else. It's social. You talk about it. This is all good. Parents should not keep their kids away from movies. What's really bad is the opposite of that. A child alone with a machine in his hand, that is multifunction. That can train him faster than anything. B.F. Skinner would be so envious of life today. He had to stand there and press a button to give the rats rewards, but it's totally automated now. And they're not really stories. Nothing in 15 seconds is a story. Sure, you can But it's not really, so you don't have time to get immersed in it. Humans get immersed in stories. It takes a while for it to weave its spell. So that's the worst possible thing, and that's the main thing we do. Because what we all learned is that the iPad or just your phone, like, we're all busy, especially if you've got young kids. You got 2 young kids, so you have a single mother in particular. What are you going to do? Just give them the screen. They'll be quiet for hours. And you can do your work. You can make dinner. You can do your text and email. What I would say is, don't give your kid their own touchscreen device until they're 14. No iPad. Don't give your kid an iPad. Now, you can give them your iPad on long trips. There are apps you can put on that will block, so it's just they can watch movies. Like, it's on a long trip, fine, watch a movie. That's totally fine. But it's the here's a multifunction device. Kid, you do what you want, and it's always going to end up at short videos. That's where it mostly gravitates to. YouTube Shorts, TikTok, things like that. And that is devastating for the ability to pay attention. Just one final point. What I'm seeing from my students is when you grow up that way, you develop an extraordinary ability to judge. Is this the most interesting thing I could be watching right now? I've been on it for 7 seconds. Doesn't look very promising. Let me switch. Oh yeah, this is great. Yeah. So you become an expert judge of whether something is the maximally interesting, and anything less than maximally
for the
interesting.
shortest, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
well,
how long?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose, if it was super interesting, you'd watch it for minutes.
Right.
But we're training our kids to not be able to.
But the
pay
threshold, the threshold for being bored
yeah.
with a piece of content and like allowing for it to kind of play out.
That's right.
And
that's why book reading is in free fall. They're not going to read books.
I feel it too. I mean, I think we all feel it, right?
Yeah.
Our ability
well, I
to
feel
focus,
it because just there's so much stuff coming in, and I do all my reading on a screen because then I can take notes. But yeah, I need to experiment with going back to paper where there are no distractions.
Right. So a few years ago, John, you and I had a conversation just before you went in to dinner with Mark Zuckerberg. This has been a very noisy issue for a while.
Yeah.
Does he get it?
So I've had a few conversations with Mark. I had in August virtually, in August of 2019 virtually, in January of 2020 in person, and I just saw him at a conference actually a few weeks ago. And we had the same conversation all 3 times. It was, saying, Mark, I think there's evidence that social media is hurting kids, especially teenage girls. And he says, no, it's just correlational. And then we go back and forth. And that was not an unreasonable position in 2019. But I think it's become an unreasonable position because there's so much, as I was saying, there was so many different kinds of evidence. And I don't think he gets that. Now, of course, I don't know what he really believes. Of course, he's a very competitive person. He's always been a very competitive person, and that's admirable in some ways. And so he's doing what it takes to make his company successful, and boy, is it successful. So at least in conversation, no, he does not. Oh, in his testimony before Congress, he said flat out, this is, the view of the scientific community is that this is not causation, it's just correlation, something like that.
So there is something there on the competitive front, right? On the nature of how competitive these systems are, right? Yeah. And this is, I think, part of the macro coordination issue that we're facing when it comes to social media, which is that if you are a platform owner, we like to think about them as monopolies because they monopolize huge portions of our attention. But it's not a monopoly of platforms that are available for use right now. And if you look at the kind of collapsing of different content types, they're all converging on one type, which is the short form video that you swipe that's sub 1 minute that you get, because that's the fastest way to get people in and keep people for a long duration of time.
Yep. And it has the biggest regret. It's the thing that you can do that most hurts people, yet they're still willing to do it.
It's also the most highly competitive space. So if Mark, for instance, decides not to use these highly addictive algorithms, then they'll jump to TikTok or somewhere else, or even X or somewhere else, right? So, or YouTube, right? Which is also converged on this. This is a big collective coordination problem, which I think points towards the algorithm, one of the primary issues that we're facing right now. Yeah. And if I was going to kind of back into the ledger of the biggest harms, you and I wrote this article together in 2019 about the harms of social media. We focused on 3 primary things: social metrics, the one-click share, and the algorithm. I would put the algorithm now, at this point in time, like an 80%, 80-20 power law of influence on us now, right? In terms of what it actually changed. I think all those other things happened as well. But now there's this thing, which is truly one of the most impressive feats of, of architecture and engineering to take a huge corpus of human knowledge and information and serve you the thing that will keep you, specifically you, on site longer. And these things are going to get better and better and better into the future. So 2 questions. One is, how do you solve a coordination problem like that amongst these larger entities? And 2, where is this going? Because there's a couple of accounts that I follow on social media right now. Sorry, I don't even follow them, but they are bespoke algorithmic realities. All right. So there's like these nostalgia feeds. So the algorithm knows your age, right? It knows your demographics, where you came from. It knows a bunch of other stuff about you, but a lot of that's kind of metadata and behavioral data. But it knows, based on those specific things, that I grew up, in the 90s. So I get these images of like AI generated.
Oh, I've seen them. They're amazing.
Yeah, they're amazing. Of like with like nostalgic 90s music playing in the background. It's like a street corner with a kid like shooting hoops, or it's like someone in the video game arcade like playing Mortal Kombat or something. And it's these throwbacks that just do tickle these parts of me. There's nothing about that content that needs to be created by a human.
Right.
Nothing at all. Right. So that's the direction that we're going, which is the convergence of generative AI and engagement algorithms together. Just in the next, I would say, I'd give it 18 months before we have agents creating content, bespoke content for us as individuals to keep us in these short form loops.
That's right. So I think about it a little bit differently, but it'll link up to what you just said, because I'm thinking a lot about, is there any kind of social media that I would say is okay for children? What is it about social media that is just so completely incompatible with childhood? And the way I cut it is there are 2 things: addiction and talking to strangers. Those are the big 2. So children, why do we have age limits in the real world? We have age limits because we want to protect children from addictive things, from extraordinary violence, graphic violence, and graphic sex, and also other kinds of harm, especially physical harm. If your kid's on social media, they're exposed to all 4 of those. And so what if someone were to come up with a platform on which there are no algorithms, no addictive features, and everyone on it was identity verified? And what I mean by that is the early internet, the idea was, anonymous, let everybody interact, and it'll free everyone up. But as a social psychologist, I know if you put a bunch of people in a space and everyone has a mask and no one can be held responsible for whatever they do, most people will be good, but 5 or 10% are going to take advantage of everybody. And that's exactly what happens over and over again. There's a word called enshittification, that every platform starts off with these, it's going to be great, but it all becomes shit because they don't take precautions against this. You could get rid of it instantly if you have know your customer laws. Some industries like banking, you can't just be exchanging money with random people on the internet. If you want to have online banking, you have to know your customer. And these are federal laws. So I don't think children should ever be on a platform that doesn't have know your customer laws or that uses addictive features. It's that simple. Other than that, don't be on until you're 16 and really 18.
So what about this attention race to the bottom that we're facing right now? Because if you assume that they're the worst that they're going to be.
The algorithm makes that a lot worse. The algorithm is key to that. I agree. Yeah.
Like they're going to get much, much better moving forward, right?
That's right. That's one of the big effects of AI.
Doesn't do it the other one
That's
well.
right. In a free market society, when we're talking about adults, there's not a lot that can be done in America. In Europe, they can do a lot more in the way of regulation, but this is all just talking about adults. Children are an entirely different story. Children are not adults. Parents care about their children. Parents see their children being messed up. The kids see themselves being messed up. We've got to just stop. We've got to stop. So the idea of stuffing kids full of screens and technology, even if you can make a case that, it'll be great, the tutoring will be amazing. So I think we need to have the precautionary principle with children, especially younger children, which is assume it is harmful until it's proven safe. So there's no way to stop the race to the bottom for how they treat adults. We can put a stop to it right away by saying you can't do this to children. You can't put them in contact with drug dealers. Snapchat could get rid of this problem tomorrow even if they just said, we're actually keeping records of what was said. The person you're corresponding with, they can't see it.
But
if a kid, if a
that
kid dies from a
vast
jug,
majority of what kids are sexting each other, and so
exactly.
they're going to stop that right away.
So if you want to make a platform for anonymous people to exchange sex photos and buy drugs, fine, go do that for adults. It's wild. I mean, this is not even close. The idea that this is not even close.
Yeah.
So that's my main thing. Just keep the kids off. This is not appropriate for kids.
The rest of us, however, we are kind of screwed.
Especially in a free market society in which it's really cheap to buy influence, in which it's legal and cheap to buy legislators, because they all have to raise so much money.
Yeah.
So to get to reform, so what can we do? So a couple of things. First, my assumption on the political chaos and instability and the threats to democracy is not that America's going to collapse and we're all going to die. I think it's more like, and I might be wrong about this model, but the model I have in my head is Argentina. Imagine that we're Argentina just with a lot more money. And they've had, military dictatorships, they had democracy, they have corruption, they have all, but the people aren't dead, they just don't have an optimal state. They have a very suboptimal state. That is one possible future for us. That there will still be United States of America, but it'll be very dysfunctional. It won't be a continuous line from 1789 through 2050. There will be breaks or different constitutions or military or God knows what. So that's a possibility. And so how do we prevent the worst aspects of that? And B, how would we survive if that happens, if we lose this amazing American experiment, if it fails? And I'll go back to, so I had an article 3 years ago called Why the Past 10 Years of American Life Have Been Uniquely Stupid. It was in The Atlantic. And I believe I ended the article by saying, okay, how do we adapt? There's like 3 buckets. And the first one was, we've got to protect the kids. That's the first thing. If we can't, if the kids are going to come out messed up and unable to pay attention, then it's game over. There's really nothing, it's not worth doing anything else. So we got to protect the kids. 2 is we've got to harden our democratic systems. And, it'd be great if we could say, how about no redistricting except every 10 years? How about no gerrymandering? How about no giving money or dark money, or so there's all kinds of things. One of
the things you mentioned there is nonpartisan primaries, basically. Yeah,
right. That would be one of the biggest. That's right, nonpartisan primaries, because so there are things that we can do to have a much more vibrant democracy, and it'll be interesting to see. I think some places, Iceland, New Zealand, there will be some places that I think are much healthier democracies. There'll be others like Singapore that are sort of quasi-authoritarian, quasi-democratic. They're very foresightful in their public policy. They pay their civil servants a huge amount of money, and then they punish the hell out of them if they ever take any money from anyone. So they have an honest civil service. Yeah. So we have to look at this as sort of like we're heading into a storm. The storm is never going to end. That's the rest of the future is storm. What kind of ship are we going to have to go through this storm?
What are you hopeful about the future, and what are you doing personally right now?
Yeah, it's not quite that I'm hopeful about the future. It's rather there's an attitude that I think we have to take, which is that humanity and America in particular are facing possibly the greatest challenge in history. Obviously, the Civil War was also the existential crisis. So we're facing one of those. And my parents, when they were kids in the 1930s, the world was facing that, and we had a world war. And so, history moves in cycles. This is actually a hopeful thing. History moves in cycles. There are cycles where institutions get stronger and better, and life improves, and then there are downward cycles. And the work of Peter Turchin and several other people look at cyclical theories of history. It was predicted that we were, reaching a down point around in the 2020s. So there's sort of the natural, 80-year cycles of sort of up and down that happen to coincide with this incredible technological revolution, which brought about the end of the 500-year Gutenberg period. We're leaving one technological era, we're entering another. So if you look at it that way, then you see, okay, you've got these up-down cycles, and you have this 500-year period ending and a new period beginning, the network era. So we might make, it might be just we're on the downside, and there's this giant thing coming down on us. But maybe, in 10, 20, 30 years, if cyclical theories are correct, things might be actually a lot better. So again, there are definitely paths to an amazing future. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying right now, you and I are having trouble seeing them, but I'm confident that they're there. So it's an incredibly exciting time to be alive. And our comfortable idea that if we just get a good education and save money for retirement, we'll be okay. So it's incredibly exciting. It's going to be very difficult. But we have the honor of living at this hinge point in human history. And, at least you and I we're doing our part in terms of trying to help people understand what's happening. So, there's a place for everyone in adapting to this greatest change in human history. I'm not at all depressed. I'm very concerned about the future, but I'm incredibly energized. Like, what's happening is so interesting and so important. And that's kind of thrilling.
It's an honor to be witnessing the catastrophes as well as the opportunities.
Yeah, this is the ultimate shared human experience.
It really is. John, thank you so much for the time. This has been great.
I hope so. Thank you, Tobias. Always a pleasure to talk.
Thank you for listening to the first episode of Into the Machine with Tobias Rose-Stockwell. If you enjoyed this, please do rate us on Apple Podcasts. It makes a huge difference in helping other people find the show. If you're interested in the ideas from this podcast, my book, Outrage Machine, was published by Hachette, and you can find my Substack at tobias.substack.com. Thank you for listening. I'm really grateful for the gift of your attention.